All right, hello mortals. It has been a very long time since I've been able to do one of these, or since I have chosen to do one of these. Hear the sound of my dog coming, or maybe not. I hope this streaming setup is a little better. The camera is going to be a little shaky because I'm using my phone on a as precarious a perch as you can possibly get, I think, but it's stable as long as I don't touch anything. So as soon as I touch something, it becomes a problem. But anyway, kind of as the description there says, this is my unboxing of the hardcover copies of Withered Kingdom. I did have a relatively popular, especially for my normal level of Facebook and Instagram popularity. My photo that I shared of the first box of hardcovers did pretty well. So hopefully this is going to be a good way for anyone interested in buying a hardcover, or interested in at least telling a friend, because that's a huge thing for me, huge thing for any independent writer, is word of mouth. So if you end up watching this, if you end up developing at least enough interest to be able to tell someone you know that you know someone who wrote a fantasy novel that's available in hardcover, please tell them about it. So it's called Withered Kingdom. I've done some readings of it before. I will probably do a little more reading today, but since I'm more than halfway through the book, I'm not going to start over. At some point, I will probably do a full audiobook reading of the whole thing and get that recorded, but that's not what's in the cards right now. So anyway, let's get started. I'm not going to be moving my camera because of where it is. I'm just going to open this box, and you'll have to trust me that it's a real box. So this is also sort of a review of how Amazon handles Kindle Direct Publishing for hardcovers. So I'll tell a little bit of the story about how the hardcover came to be. So shortly after, I'm trying to cut the box open at the same time, and that will shake the camera, I apologize. Shortly after I published Withered Kingdom in paperback, hardcover became an option. Let me just finish cutting this. I'll talk after that. So that way you're dealing with shaky cam as little time as possible. Give me a moment. There we go. I've got the box open now. Well, so as I was saying before I started to open that and shake the camera too much, the process for making the hardcover started because I originally only thought that Kindle Direct Publishing, which is the self-publishing tool that I use, it's an Amazon thing. That's what I use to publish my books. I thought that paperback and ebook were going to be the only option. Even at that, when I started with paperbacks, paperbacks were kind of a new thing as it was. But now that hardcover is available, I'm by no means the first adopter, but I'm in the first year. It's technically a beta project that Amazon is rolling out. Is this hardcover program that they're doing for Kindle Direct Publishing. I think a lot of authors have embraced it, and that's a very good thing, because it's, as you'll be able to see, a rather high quality product for, I mean, it's not free. You still have to pay the printing cost for each copy, but the process of getting it done, you don't really have to pay anything to register to make the book. Just like with ebook and the soft covers, you don't really need to pay anything to Amazon to get it done until there's printing costs associated. And then they're taking some of their cut of any sales that happen online. So that includes the Kindle version. Even though there's no print cost for that, they're still taking some portion of your income, or the sale. You get a percentage of it as royalties. The rest of it goes to Amazon because they're hosting it. It's on their servers. It's a digital product, so you can price it almost however you'd like. Other than that, it's paperback and hardcover that are a lot more logistically difficult because they have to handle the printing, the storage, transportation, and the delivery for you. So you're getting a really good deal compared to if you went with any other self-publishing platform, where they would probably charge you for every step of that process. But Amazon is huge. They don't really need to charge for a million different things, and I feel like they probably could, and they'd get away with it. They're still going to have more people publishing with them than anyone else. But I think hardcovers is where they're kind of getting beaten to the punch with competitors like Ingram Spark. So they decided to take their stab at it. And so I felt like that was a good idea for me anyways, to go with Amazon for the hardcover. I could have gone with a different printer. I own the copyright, so I have every right to distribute it however I want within some initial agreements with Amazon. My cat and my dog are barging into the room. Hello. So they're going to be here with me. But yeah. So the hardcover is something I'm considerably more proud of than the soft cover. I put more work into actually making the hardcover, and you might be wondering, well, what kind of work do you do? Don't you just kind of send the same file? No, it's a lot more complicated than that, or at least I made it more complicated than that. That complication mostly comes from the changes and improvements that I decided to make to the book itself, to the inside of the book. I also made a new cover. It uses the same artwork and general stylistic aesthetic that it had before, but I have changed it so that it looks better as a hardcover than it did, I think, as a soft cover. So I believe Facebook Live through mobile is going to be mirroring this video. I don't think Twitch does. I have been doing some Twitch streaming for other things. I don't think Twitch has been reversing my videos. But if you see my book look backwards, it's not because it's printed backwards, it's because it's Facebook's video. And hopefully if I'm saving this and uploading it later onto YouTube and you ended up watching it there or on my blog, shout out to everyone doing that anyway, I should be able to flip it in post and make those kind of changes. But anyway, here's the book. Let's see if I can get that in frame. There's Withered Kingdom. If anyone wants to comment and tell me if that looks like it's backward, it'll probably, it's not printed backward, but it looks like it is probably. Let me actually grab a soft cover. I have one right here to compare it to. So this is a pre-printing, everything's shaking, hold on. This is a pre-print version of the soft cover. This is not what the soft cover that you buy is going to look like for the print there, and that black border is going to be gone. But this black spine and black back page are consistent with the way the regular production version of the soft cover, that's how it looks. It looks the same. So this hardcover version here, this is how the hardcover looks now. It has the same color spine as the front and the same color back as the spine and the front. So it's actually a wraparound image that I created. I used some of my elementary knowledge of Photoshop and basic image editing. I think my cat's going to try to jump on me. Are you going to jump on me? No? Okay. Maybe he won't. He probably will as soon as I forget that he was trying to. So yes, here is how that looks. I'll get a little closer in there so you can see some of the details. I know my lighting isn't perfect for this. Cat, no! Don't do that. Jeez. But yeah, here's some of the detail you can see in there. This is like a granite type of texturing to it. It's not a physical texture, it's just an image texture. The art by my friend, whom I've mentioned before in other streams, same person did the same art for both versions of the book. I have the same picture of me that I've been using for a while. It is before the pandemic, so before all this grew out of my head. And so it doesn't exactly look the same as I look now, but it's close enough. I suppose the cover itself is thicker than I ever expected. It is quite impressively durable and dense. There's not a lot of give to it. It feels like it's made to last for a rather long time. There's a bit of crease here around the spine, and that makes perfect sense. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. This specific copy that I pulled out has a bit of, if you can see that, I'm not sure. There we go. A little bit of shipping curling on the corner of the spine there, and there's some other marks on here, but it's you put a bunch of boxes, or put a bunch of books in a cardboard box, and you ship it from Illinois, I believe is where these are printed. Yes, Maumee, Illinois. There's going to be some changes in shipping, so tiny slight bit of damage. If you do order a copy from me, if you send me a message and say, hey, I want a copy of your hardcover, I'll send you it. It'll look probably the tiniest bit more shipped than these look now. This current box has about 10 books in it. I have more than 10 on my person right now, so if you are interested in a copy, absolutely let me know. Reach out. However you're comfortable. If you know me personally already, I am more than willing to talk about it whenever. And yeah, let's work something out if that's what you're interested in. But moving forward with the production quality here, I did make one major change from the soft cover here. It's probably going to be a little difficult to tell with this lighting, but that paper color is not white. That is the cream option for the paper. So cream and white look really similar most of the time until you're actually sitting there reading the book. You open it up and you notice that it's not black on white. Like, the ink is pretty black, and it's very clear, by the way. Amazon does not cut on quality in terms of the clarity of the printing, or any of this, really. Some people might prefer a dust jacket, or a fold-over cover to the book, but this is how they come. This is how they come right out of the box. There's no folded cover on this. There's nothing you can slip over it. You could make one if you wanted, and I've been thinking of going to a print shop and printing some, just so people can have an alternate cover for the book, or at least just a way to protect it more from dust and shipping or whatever, because you can replace a dust jacket really easy. But this is called a case laminate. That's the industry term for what this is. I'm a player of Dungeons and Dragons, and the way the Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition books are printed, they come out just like this, pretty much. There's more texturing to the cover because they have like a matte part and a shiny part. But as this stands, this is a very high quality book for the printing price. The printing price is very cheap. I think it's because it's generally just being subsidized by how many people are out there printing books for whatever purposes. If they're someone like me and they're a novelist, or even if they're printing something for their family, like a memoir, or making a journal with a custom cover, so they don't need to go out and buy one from a store. You could design, your own cover, and, little filigrees in the pages. You could totally do that. There's tons of people that make what's known as like no content or minimal content printing on Amazon, where they will print something where it's basically just empty pages or just lines for you to write on. That's the thing people do a lot. So because of that, there are so many people using the services all the time. I think that Amazon's able to afford using the best quality printing and production methods that they can for people to do Kindle Direct publishing like this. So you end up with a really solid book. This cover's not going to bend without tremendous force. It feels like it's nice and thick. It smells like a fresh new book, like you might expect. Using the cream paper, at least for Withered Kingdom, makes it feel like a better book. The paperback is printed on white paper because I wasn't thinking that hard about what I was doing when I assembled it all together. I don't know if you're going to be able to see here. This is what the paperback white looks like, and this is the cream of the hardcover. You might be able to see a bit of a difference, but probably not too much. But it feels more like a fantasy book. It feels like you're actually reading, stories about fantastic creatures and magic and things like that. So I wish that I had chosen the cream for the soft cover, and I technically can still make a lot of the changes that I made to the hardcover version for the soft cover as well. I just have to do it. And writers are notorious procrastinators. So it is fighting creative entropy, and even, I guess, a sort of small business form of entropy. That's the brutal reality for all writers, is despite us almost all being cripplingly introverted, if we want to sell books, we either have to have a big publishing company be really lucky and have a lot of confidence in our work, or we have to do it all through the sweat of our brow. And since this room is already warm, I'm already sweating, so, maybe I deserve it. Anyway, so Withered Kingdom, hardcover. Cutting off some of my light source when I use that side. I'll try not to do that. One of the major changes that I made with this hardcover version that you do not see in the paperback right now is I added drop caps to the beginning of chapters. I will have to find a page to show that off. I'm not super impressed. Let's go over a different one. I'm not super impressed with how the drop caps came out, but that's like this giant letter T here. The original document that I made and gave to Amazon shows that as being exactly 3 lines, with the top of that T being perfectly lined up with the H and E of the rest of the word the. They are perfectly lined up in the document, and the letter T is exactly 3 lines tall, and it looks beautiful. And no matter what I did to that document, as it was, every time I gave it to Amazon to show me the digital mock-up of what it would look like, it came out like this. So I don't know how to fix that. That is a bit of a concern of mine, but it is a small concern. You want everything in your book to be perfect, but you don't want to spend forever trying to make it perfect. You just kind of want to get it good enough and then move on, at least. So this T here is not exactly lined up the way I want, and that's how all the drop caps are, but it's not terrible at the same time. Another change here, this is pretty much all the changes are at the beginning of sections like this, is I put Roman numerals in an enormous capital above the title, if I can follow my own movement through a camera. So yes, giant Roman numeral, and then title, and then drop cap, no indented first line. That's something I had to get used to, because when I type, I like to indent everything, because I just think the indentation looks really nice. But if you're going to use a drop cap, you can't indent, because that looks terrible. Things you don't think about until you're actually making a book. But here's another one. So there's going to be the Roman numeral 3, and I used a font. Those are literally, that's just the letter I typed out 3 times in a gigantic bold version of the same font that is used for the rest of the body text of the book. The font I'm using is a totally free font called Sorts Mill Gaudi. It is one of my favorite fonts. It's one I discovered in the process of making the hardcover for the book. So if you compare the fonts from the soft cover to the hard cover, you will notice they are different. Sorts Mill Gaudi being free, totally commercially free, no attribution necessary kind of thing, and being a really high quality font made it a dead ringer for the book. It works great for a fantasy type of theme because it has kind of a medieval-ish look to it, very strong serifs and multi-weighted. I don't know if anyone out there is super into fonts like I am, but if you can see really close in there, some of the spots like the hook of a letter J will have like kind of a ball at the end of it, and then it will slim out, and then it will thicken as it goes up to the rest of the letter. And there'll be a serif at the top, that's the little line. But the changing in stroke width, I believe is the term, is stroke width, I think is really beautiful. It's an underappreciated aspect of design that I wish more people could appreciate. And we might stop using sans all the time. We might move away from the Helvetica Arial Calibri generation and kind of get back to some tasteful serif fonts. The numbers, actually, at the bottom of the page, I remember being a different font because Sorts Mill Gaudi uses what's called a book type numbering system, where like numbers are not perfectly lined up, they're kind of up, they're a little mismatched deliberately. So like a 3, the top curve of a 3 will be even with like where a letter O would be, and then the bottom of the 3 goes down into like below the line where the curve of a J stroke would be. Just the same with like a 9 would kind of have its tail going down, and a 6 would be a little smaller with its tail, the upper tail of the 6 going up. I didn't like how that looked as a page numbering system, so I found one that I could use that all the numbers were lined up just right. I had to learn how to get Microsoft Word, which is, since I don't have the money right now for any Adobe products to use InDesign, I used Microsoft Word to create these headings here. So this was actually all made in Microsoft Word until it got to Kindle's own software that they hold on the Kindle Direct Publishing website, and that's what finalized the production of what you see in this book. So I've got my name on there, and I've got the title of the book. I wanted to do the title of the book and the title of the chapter, but that was more complicated than I was willing to go into at the time, and I don't think it's really that necessary, because some of my chapters, I use that in quotations, I suppose, chapters, the parts of my book that have subtitles, I have so many of them. I move really quickly from one to the other, just because I feel like writing really long chapters is boring for people to read, and we live in the Twitter generation, and so people are used to having content being as short as it could possibly be. Kindle Vella is a thing, and that's like a short fiction where the chapters have to be below 5,000 words, and 5,000 words is a pretty meaty chapter, but most of them are around 1,000 to 2,000 words. That's a shorter chapter for a grown-up book. So I can go back and forth between having scenes in my books that are really long and some that are really short. So I don't use the term chapter, at least in this series. That's probably something that would get beaten out of me if I were to try to go with a traditional publisher. It's a sign of my own individuality and refusal to line up with the industry. I feel like it's important as a self-published author to set yourself apart in some way or another. Because if you don't do that, I mean, you're just kind of fitting into the mold. You're becoming one of what everyone else is, and I'm not that. At least not when it comes to writing my books. As it is, if you're just joining me now, or if you haven't really joined any of my Facebook live streams before, this is Withered Kingdom. This is my fantasy novel that I published through Amazon's Kindle Direct Publishing. It is the story of an angel who has lost all of his memories. His name is Gia, and he is on a quest to regain his memories, but in the process of doing so, finds out that he has a destiny much greater than that, much greater than just looking into the past. And he finds that his path through the future, to the future, in this primitive world that he finds himself in, is the path forward lies on battlefields and in enemy territory and other concerning, very decidedly non-peaceful places. Gia wants peace, he strives for it, but he is in a world where he has to fight to survive and to understand who he is supposed to be and why he's there. He doesn't even know that he's an angel. He doesn't even believe it for most of the book. So it's a quest for his own self-actualization, his understanding of the world that he is in, and his him learning the importance of connections to other people in his life. I like to pitch the book as the world of Lord of the Rings if you gave it a magic system like Avatar: The Last Airbender, and a plot sort of like The Bourne Identity. This is the first in a series. There is more coming. I am mostly done with the next book. The next book is going to be at least twice as thick as this, unless some substantial cutting to the manuscript happens pretty soon, because this is about 60,000 words. If you want to look at how thick that book is, it's not a flash fiction, it's not a novella, it's maybe a short novel, depending on your standards, but it is more than 50,000 words, and that's considered a relatively universal standard for how long, in terms of word count, a book needs to be considered a novel. So this is 100,000 over that requirement. The book that I'm working on right now, the sequel to this book, is at 120,000 words. That's still a quarter of your average Game of Thrones book, or A Song of Ice and Fire book, and most of Brandon Sanderson's like adult fantasy, grown-up fantasy, perhaps. So I have a long way to go to reach that level of epic proportions, but it's something that I am working on, something that I strive for. A few books after the next book, that book should get into the multiple 100,000 words territory. That's still pretty far into the future, but I have a lot of that drafted already. So I do have added into this version of the book updates to my acknowledgments. The page numbering is different. I'm mostly saying this if you've already had... Whoa. Is that normal? I think I just discovered something. That's very strange. I just noticed something I've never noticed before about the hardcover. Actually, I have to check to see if that's happening in the softcover or not. Whoa! Sorry about the shaky camera. So in my table of contents, yeah, it's not in the softcover. My table of contents here, when you get down to the lower chapters there, all the page, like PG and then the number, are on the same level. And I don't know how this slipped past me. It's not a really big problem, but it's a little thing that I've just now noticed, is that the 3-digit page numbers here, you'll see that it goes the PG and then the number. Instead of having them on the same line, it's on the second line, which causes all of these to double space, or perhaps triple space, because these are about double spaced right here, and then these are now triple spaced. That's the first time I've noticed that. This is probably the closest look I have had at the book now that it's in print. So that's something new. You're learning that at the same time as me. And then I have a new section in here, notes on this edition of the hardcover. And then I've made some little grammatical changes. As that note says, you'll be able to read that if you buy the book. I made a lot of little changes grammatically, not to the actual words themselves, but to the punctuation. Some capitalizations. I was capitalizing the word general as a title for the character General Nova in places where it did not make sense for it to be capitalized. When he's not being addressed by name as General Nova, where I just say the General, and technically you're not supposed to capitalize the G in general when you're saying that. So that's a change that has happened. I'm going to adjust how I'm sitting for a moment. Get a little more comfortable for going forward here. Let's see, what else can I point out here? Oh, right. See if I can get the camera in right on that. The stitching, at least you can tell that there is stitching holding these papers together. That black and white stripe there is the cloth that all of the stitching going through the pages is bound to, and that is what is holding the pages together. Unlike in the softcover or paperback, that's just glue. A lot of cheaper hardcovers will just use glue as well, because it's the aesthetic of the hardcover does not change whether you stitch it or not, but the durability does. I'm sorry, I keep shaking this table. I'm not intending to do that. I need to create a more stable setup for my phone and computer. I have an idea for how I can fix that, but at least for this live stream right now, this is what I've got, and so this is what I'm going to deal with for now until I can figure out something in the future. This spine design is also new. See if I can get some good light on there. So I have used this same, I forget what this is called. I think this is called neon. This effect that's going on here, where the color of the letter is technically black, but it is being blown out of the edges of the letter itself, kind of creating a negative. I'm using that as the cover's design, or the spine, but not my name, just because my name isn't as important as the book. I'm more interested in people reading the book and enjoying the book and having a good time, enjoying some of the thoughts that have been in my head and some of the things that I have spent an awful lot of time thinking about and pondering about, writing about, and daydreaming about, I suppose. So I really don't care about my own fame. My name isn't as important. You'll see it in a lot of books today. You go to a grocery store and you go to the trade paperback aisle, you'll see usually on the top in huge letters taking up like half of the book, it'll say the author's name, probably because it's something like Anne Rice or Stephen King, where it's enormous and catches people's attention immediately, and people will buy it just based on the name. And then there'll be like a name kind of taking up some of the bottom half. You'll see that with like James Patterson and a lot of the other really big authors out there today, but I don't want that kind of I don't know, attention put to my name. Sure, I'd love to be appreciated for my skill as a writer. I'd love to be known as the guy that writes those books, but the process of writing for me is a process of taking something that I have had in my mind, characters and events and places and situations that give me a lot of excitement, or at least a lot of emotion. They're not always purely positive emotions, but putting them down into a computer document so that way it can be read later by someone is a process of making what's real in my head real for other people. So maybe that doesn't make a lot of sense, but I think a lot of other creative people, musicians and the like, might understand a little better what I mean by that. So I don't like to think of it as a book. It's really more of a story. It's in its physical form, it's a book, yes, of course. But the story is one that I have labored with for a long time. It has been the process of using words to sculpt it into existence. It is now in a form as a book. As a book. It is in a form where other people can read it. And through the magic of human imagination and the wonder that is reading, people can kind of get their own interpretation of what's going on in my head into their head. And hopefully someone else will be inspired by it, and they'll feel some portion of the excitement that I do, thinking about Gia's journeys in the world of Fyron, his friends, his enemies, the experiences that he has. This has been a labor I've worked with for a long time. I relate a lot to the stories that I heard of J.K. Rowling when she finished the last book, or the 7th book, I should say, because there have been other Harry Potter books since then, or, Wizarding World related books. But basically, she had a nervous breakdown when she finished. She went to a hotel in London or something, somewhere in England, to finish the story, and she kind of had a nervous breakdown because she was no longer with Harry anymore. Harry was out of her head. She had written it all. The story was over. It'll take me a very long time to finish this story, and so I imagine there would be a lot of emotional grief related with finishing a story for a character. I don't really write short stories very often. I have about 2 that I think I'm kind of proud of. I haven't really published them yet. I should hopefully be able to do that relatively soonish. I'll take a look back at the one I wrote in college and update that. I remember I hammered that out as hard as I could, keep it as short as possible, and make it as meaningful, as dense with metaphor and patterning and theming as I possibly could. But I'm an older person now. I've lived more of life. I have experienced more things, and I think that I can make that story better. I just, late last year or early this year, I don't remember which, I wrote another short story that is a science fiction short story. The one that I wrote in college is sort of spiritual in nature, I would say. It's not really religious. It's more, because it doesn't have any specific religious dependencies, I would say, but some very broad, generalized spiritual themes to it. So that story is one that, again, I haven't really worked on in a long time. But the science fiction story is one that I was kind of sitting there thinking about some of the sci-fi stories that I had read before or seen, movies like Planet of the Apes or stuff like that. Because space travel is an important part of the story, I created a story. I don't really want to say much about it until it's published, but it's one I think will give people a bit of a pause to think about the future of some of the developments that are happening in technology right now, and see where that takes us in the future. I am definitely inspired by Philip K. Dick, whose books I am starting a foray into. I read The Man in the High Castle in college, and I am currently reading Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which, if you know what that is the book that Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2042 are based on. I haven't seen Blade Runner 2042. I just watched the first Blade Runner for the first time like last month, which is weird, I know, for someone who's a really big fan of science fiction, but now that I've come around to it, it immediately became one of my favorite movies. I don't know why it took me so long to watch it. I watched the final cut, and it's fantastic, and it made me want to buy the book right away. I already knew it was called Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, but when you go to buy it on Amazon, they don't sell it as Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, they sell it as Blade Runner. So, even though the Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep is printed on the top. It says the book that inspired Blade Runner, and so Blade Runner's in much bigger letters. So if you did want to read that, that is out there. I'm talking really fast. I hope I'm not leaving anyone in the dust. So as inspiration, anyway, Blade Runner. Not that it's similar at all to the sci-fi story that I wrote, but it's my inspiration from stuff that Philip K. Dick has written. I feel like it's something that is sort of in that vein. I've also read Isaac Asimov to a relatively familiar degree, a few short stories here and there, including most of the iRobot collection. If you haven't read iRobot is a collection of short stories. It's not the story that is in the movie with Will Smith. That's not what it is. Some elements from the iRobot book are in the iRobot movie, but including a robot named Sonny. The character Sonny comes from one of the stories, but Will Smith's character is a synthesis of a few different characters that are in the book, and probably just some stuff that they created for the movie. So that's Isaac Asimov. As far as other science fiction, Orson Scott Card has been a really big influence on me because I read Ender's Game in college, and that made me dive deep into the Enderverse, the whole Ender series. I know he's a bit of a problematic name for people right now, but in terms of separating the art from the artist, he's still probably one of my biggest influences as a science fiction writer. Withered Kingdom is not science fiction, though. I don't mean to confuse anyone about that. Withered Kingdom is a fantasy book through and through. It's definitely much more influenced by J.R.R. Tolkien, J.K. Rowling in terms of Harry Potter. I wrote most of it before I started reading The Wheel of Time, but I think the direction that the books are going get more influence from The Wheel of Time because I have started reading them and I watched the series on Amazon Prime Video. Just looking at my bookshelf here for other names I could probably mention. Other fantasy inspirations. I don't know. Despite being, I feel like if I were to be known for writing anything, I would want to be known as being a fantasy novel writer, more than a science fiction writer. I love science fiction. Science fiction is wonderful. I have read more science fiction than I have read fantasy. I have watched more science fiction movies, watched more science fiction TV shows than I have fantasy TV shows or movies. I have, probably just because the content is a lot more available, played probably more science fiction video games, because you could count stuff like Pokemon and, I don't know. Mario might even be more fantasy than anything, because I guess there's dragons and other crazy creatures, dinosaurs, and all that. Even if there are plumbers, there's still a lot more fantastical elements than you will find in most science fiction. So, as a fantasy author, I have taken a lot of what I have experienced from science fiction and put it into fantasy. And so that's sort of what you'll see. A lot of the TV shows, cartoons, animes, video games, even music to a degree, movies, any form of entertainment, comic books, manga, everything that I have taken in, I have taken in things that have helped create this book, and I have put it into a fantasy world, and that's where it will firmly stay. I don't want to try to be edgy and make it like a time travel thing, but time travel might end up being an element of it, just not, leaping forward hundreds of thousands of years into a technological society. That's not what it's about. This is a lot more angels and demons, swords and sorcery, dragons and dungeons and castles, warfare, spears, that kind of thing. A lot of the trappings that you'll typically find in fantasy, that's what my book is. So, I don't know what else to say now. I think I have dried my mouth out a little bit too much by talking. But I could do a little bit more reading. just because it's been a very long time since I have read, and I already have everything set up. I don't exactly remember where I left off either. So maybe I won't do any reading for this session, but I can do that soon. Now that I have a room basically set up for streaming, I can do that, or I can at least record a video here on its own and then bring it to YouTube, into my blog, and to my Facebook page, and all my other social media later on. So anyway, that's been an unboxing and analysis of the hardcover production of Withered Kingdom by me, Nathan Thomas Orgel. It's been nice to be able to stream again. I feel like I have a little more confidence. I'm able to continue talking without hesitating quite as much as I used to. So that's something I've been trying to get over. I'm a naturally introverted person, and becoming more extroverted has been difficult, but natural at the same time. So anyway, thanks for joining everyone who has watched. Whoops, how do I stop? Oh, right. Thanks for joining everyone who has watched. Sorry for the really shaky camera. I'll try to fix that in the future. I appreciate everyone who has viewed. Please share this video wherever you can. Tell people about my book. It does me a huge favor. And if you read it too, you can chat with them about it and have a unique bonding book clubby type of experience. Or at least make fun of it and enjoy that. Because there's going to be people out there that don't like my book, and I'm prepared for that eventuality. So regardless, tell people about my book if you're watching this. It'll mean a lot to me. All right, bye.